Joaquin Guzman, Pablo Escobar, and Ismael Mayo Zambada are some of history's most famous drug lords. And while a lot is known about their vicious crimes and atrocities, not much is known about the men who carried out the orders of the drug lords. In today's video, we will enter the shadowy realm and shine a light on some of the most notorious cartel hitmen of all time. Speaking of vicious hitmen, this guy matches the description perfectly. More commonly known as El Chino Antrax, Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa would go on to become one of the most effective yet high-profile cartel assassins. The Sinaloa cartel had numerous different assassin groups. One of them was Los Antrax and was founded and headed by, you guessed it, El Chino. He mainly worked with El Chapo's second in charge, El Mayo. From 2011 to 2013, the hitman reportedly lived in Los Cabos, Baja California, and was given an order by the top leadership in the Sinaloa cartel to destroy their rival cartel in the area Los Zetas. While living there, El Chino reportedly orchestrated the murder of Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix, a high-profile leader of the Tijuana cartel, on the 18th of October 2013. His assassination can be seen in this horrifying video from his party. El Chino can be seen in the white shirt walking towards his target, when moments later you hear one deadly gunshot, followed by multiple gunshots, which ended the famous drug lord's life. According to law enforcement, the motive behind the brutal killing was to send a message that Los Antrax were in charge of organized crime in Los Cabos. Being part of the younger generation of cartel hitmen, El Chino was a frequent user of social media, often flexing his lavish lifestyle, guns, and other incriminating stuff. He is even seen at a party with Paris Hilton in this image. His presence on social media would soon bite him in the ass, since law enforcement could use the newly found information to find and arrest him. On 3rd of January 2014, he was arrested in the Netherlands and extradited to the US for drug-related crimes. In 2015, he pled guilty to involvement in cartel activities and was sentenced to 7 years and 3 months in prison. On 3rd of March 2020, he was placed under house arrest. However, shortly afterwards he escaped, but not for long. El Chino, his sister, and her husband were found dead on the night of May 14, 2020. They were visited by a Sinaloa cartel hit squad, who ultimately eliminated them. Even though we can't exactly pinpoint El Chino's total kill count, it is speculated to be at least in the hundreds. However, compared to Mario Iglesias-Villegas, that is rookie numbers. Also known as the Grim Reaper for his brutal methods and lack of remorse for his actions. By the time he was in his 20s, he was already a trusted hitman for the Sinaloa cartel. Mario rose through the ranks of the cartel quickly because he did what it took, no questions asked. In the late 2000s, he was promoted to a leader position in one of El Chapo's most notorious hit squads. However, this promotion didn't come without complications. In September 2009, Mario was tasked with kidnapping a big drug dealer, Sergio Salcedo, and eliminating him. According to different sources, he was the reason the cartel lost a giant 670-pound white powder shipment. He was subsequently never seen alive again after a deadly strike from the Grim Reaper. Mario also reportedly abducted and killed 3 cartel associates from a wedding, under orders from El Chapo. Mario was cold-blooded. He didn't just do it for money, he enjoyed the process and took great pleasure in doing it. The US Department of Justice stated, Iglesias' acts of violence allowed the Sinaloa cartel to control the Juarez drug corridor and successfully import cocaine and marijuana into the United States. Even his fellow associates and hitmen were scared of him, which is why they dubbed him the Grim Reaper. His kill count surpassed every hitman in the cartel. An official number hasn't been revealed. However, during his reign as commander of El Chapo's hit squad, he is believed to have orchestrated more than 4,000 murders. Most of these were victims of the brutal war between the Sinaloa and the Juarez cartel. However, his killing spree would end in 2012 when he was arrested and found guilty of all of his terrible crimes. Narcotics trafficking, money laundering, murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of firearms.
A Sinaloa cartel member and assassin connected to thousands of murders was sentenced to life in prison today. 37-year-old Mario Iglesias-Villegas joined the cartel in 2008. He was the head of the cartel's sicarios, or assassins, until 2012 when he was arrested.
From one brutal murderer to another, Jesus Ernesto Chavez Castillo was a notorious hitman and a high-ranking member of the Barrio Azteca cartel. Castillo primarily worked as a contract killer for the ruthless Juarez cartel. They were allied with the Barrio Azteca cartel and used them as enforcers to do their dirty work. During his earlier years, it was reported that he and a lot of other Barrio Azteca members were trained by Los Zetas, one of the most dangerous drug cartels. They were trained to be perfect, dangerous and vicious assassins who could be used by the cartels at any point. Apparently, the plan was to use them to aid the Juarez cartel in the war against their rival, the Sinaloa cartel. And from this training, Castillo would become an assassin like no other. He was said to have been incredibly cruel and deadly in his methods. In a lot of cases, Castillo would often behead and dismember his victims with the hope of impressing his boss. He didn't have any remorse for his victims. All he wanted to do was to climb the ranks. However, before he could do so, he was captured and arrested in 2010 for allegedly orchestrating the hit on County Sheriff Deputy Arthur Redfills, his wife Leslie Enriquez and Jorge Alberto. To escape a long prison sentence, he decided to cooperate. In total, he confessed to over 800 murders.
He admitted that he controlled a group of hit squads of sicarios that were responsible for at least 2,000 people in Juarez in less than a year.
These were people he could remember that had been killed. He stated that it was probably more than that, since he stopped counting after the 800 mark.
He said he stopped counting after a while.
While Castillo was a more low-key and lethal hitman, you couldn't say the same thing about Jairo Velásquez Vásquez. Also known as Popeye, he would go on to become Pablo Escobar's most deadly hitman ever. As a young man, he enrolled in the Navy, however. To quote him, "The Navy only had old wooden boats and no warships. I only wanted to shoot, kill, and get adrenaline kicks. There wasn't enough action." By the time he was 17, he met Pablo Escobar for the first time. It also happens to be the same age where he killed his first person, who was a bus driver that had killed his friend's mom.
Fue a un despachador de buses que cuando era, el primero era conductor de bus y había tumbado la mamá de un amigo nuestro cuando conducía. No esperó que se bajara y no que la señora se iba a bajar y se cayó y la mató.
He also said that Pablo Escobar saw his potential and recruited him for the sole reason of eliminating people.
Y era muy bueno para matar, entonces Pablo Escobar, llegué al lado de él y éramos asesinos profesionales.
Popeye was the perfect assassin, a disciplined machine whose only purpose was to kill. In the late 70s and through the 80s, Popeye personally carried out the murder of at least 250 people himself and is believed to have orchestrated 3,000 more. In numerous different interviews, he described the act of killing as another day in the office. He had no remorse for his victims and had no problem killing people. This lack of emotional connection contributed immensely to his success as a hitman. Pablo Escobar also used Popeye for more high-profile hits, in which he would kidnap or kill a long list of important people, such as the kidnapping of Andrés Pastrana Arango, former candidate for mayor of Bogotá, the kidnapping of Francisco Santos, future vice president of Colombia, the kidnapping and murder of Carlos Mauro Hoyos, famous Colombian politician, and maybe his most famous hit of all time, the vicious murder of presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán. After serving over 23 years in prison, he was released. The former hitman started a YouTube channel where he uploaded a video of himself firing his 9mm pistol, who he used to kill his victims with. In the video, he says, "Hello, warriors. I'm here in the streets of my beloved Medellin, testing out my beautiful 9mm Pietro Beretta. We're firing it. It's a doll, a beauty." I mean, if there's one thing you have to admit about Popeye, it is that the man had some balls. He passed away in 2020. Popeye was a very public figure who loved attention. However, this El Chapo hitman did things a little differently. Manuel Alejandro Aponte Gómez, commonly referred to by his nickname El Bravo, was a professional hitman and a close lieutenant of Sinaloa cartel leader Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. He was also reportedly El Chapo's head of security, and it was him who helped El Chapo earn a reputation as someone who couldn't be caught by law enforcement. El Bravo was a ruthless killer with incredible capabilities. What made him even more feared was his background in the Mexican armed forces. During his early years, before he found his way to organized crime, he was learning the skills that would make him one of the most dangerous hitmen in Mexico. Because of this, El Bravo proved a worthy asset to the cartel. As El Chapo became a bigger and bigger target for law enforcement, his new task was to continuously ensure El Chapo's safety and that he was not caught. And even if he was caught, it was also his responsibility to plan an escape as quickly as possible.
This morning, new eye-opening surveillance videos capturing the crucial moments before Joaquin El Chapo Guzman escapes from that maximum security prison.
However, when El Chapo was caught again in 2014, the blame was on El Bravo. According to different sources, he was killed by the cartel on the 8th of April, 2014, alongside a few of his associates. His body showed signs of torture, and it was clear to see that he had been murdered. While his kill count wasn't official, it is fair to believe it was above the 50s, especially considering how close he was to El Chapo. In terms of numbered murders, El Bravo has no chance against this notorious hitman. You have probably seen Dandeni Muñoz Mosquera, also known as La Quica in the Netflix series Narcos. He was Pablo Escobar's most trusted hitman and was with him till the end in 1993. La Quica is believed to have joined the Medellin cartel in 1978 at the age of 12. The early exposure to crime and death would make him a very cold-hearted and ruthless individual. He was a loyal servant to Pablo and would do anything for his approval. This also meant that when Pablo ordered him to bomb a plane full of civilians, he was ready. La Quica was believed to be the orchestrator of the 1989 bombing of Avianca Flight 203, which killed 110 civilians. In 1989, he was also arrested and convicted of being one of the main conspirators in the assassination of the previously mentioned presidential candidate Luis Galan. However, with the help of Pablo, he was released after a bribe of $500,000 was paid. La Quica was also notorious for his insane amount of cop kills he had throughout his career as a hitman. In the late 80s, Pablo Escobar began offering a reward of $4,000 for each police officer murdered in Medellin. As soon as this news reached La Quica, he started going on a rampage, killing every man in a blue officer that he could get his eyes on. Colombian authorities believe that he was behind the murder of over 40 police officers in Medellin alone.
Buenas, ¿cómo le va?
Muy bien, ¿cómo está?
Su identificación, por favor.
Seguro que sí.
In total, it is estimated that he has carried out or been behind thousands of murders during his time as Pablo's chief assassin. La Quica was with Pablo during his last minutes, where he tried to protect him as best as he could. However, in the end, Pablo was murdered, and with them, they took La Quica. After being extradited to the US, he was sentenced to 10 life sentences behind bars and is still alive today. Another hitman who was almost on the same level as La Quica was José Antonio Acosta-Hernandez. He was the former head enforcer for the previously mentioned Juarez cartel, referred to as El Diego. He would go on to become a deadly hitman, contributing to many of the deaths in the Mexican drug war. Before linking up with Juarez cartel, El Diego was a Barrio Azteca associate, along with another hitman who we spoke of earlier, Jesus Ernesto Chavez Castillo. He reportedly formed an alliance with La Línea, a wing of the Juarez drug cartel, to fight the Sinaloa cartel. This alliance would make him a very powerful hitman since he became the plaza boss in Chihuahua and Juarez. In this role, he would go on to lead many violent and deadly attacks against his enemies. One that was particularly brutal was when El Diego ordered his hitmen to kill members of the opposition who had been seen at a birthday party in Juarez. During the incident, 16 individuals were brutally murdered and 10 more were wounded. On 15th of July 2010, he also directed a car bombing in Juarez that killed 4 people. According to numerous reports, more than 10,000 people have been murdered in Ciudad Juarez since 2008, many of them on the conscience of El Diego. He alone is suspected of being behind 1,500 killings throughout the Juarez region, cementing him as one of the most deadly cartel hitmen in history. El Diego focused a lot on low-profile targets. You couldn't really say the same thing about this guy. As the boss of the murderous criminal group, Los Priscos, Jhon Jairo Arias Tascón would go on to become one of the most notorious hitmen of all time. He was known as the boss of all hitmen and would be used regularly by the Medellin cartel in different operations. Pinina, as he was also called, was very short, however that didn't seem to affect his deadliness at all. According to one story, he was recruited by Pablo Escobar when he was caught trying to break into one of his cars and steal a music player from it. Pinina was very useful to the cartel because of his vast knowledge of people in Medellin, allowing him to easily recruit combat-ready men to kill for the cartel. One of the very first high-profile assassinations ordered by the Medellin cartel was arranged by Pinina. This was the murder of Rodrigo Lara, the Minister of Justice in Colombia. While riding in his Mercedes-Benz W123, he was ambushed by two of Pinina's hitmen with MAC-10s, who unloaded a whole magazine through the window of his car, killing him instantly. Pinina was also involved in the bombing of the DAS building, which catastrophically killed 57 people and injured a total of 2,248 people. It was the deadliest bomb attack in Latin America at the time. According to Popeye, who we discussed earlier, he and Pinina were also involved in the murder of Antonio Roldan Betancourt, who was a Colombian politician. They blew him up with a car bomb while he was on his way to his office on the 4th of July 1989. While we don't know the exact number of kills that Pinina was behind, it is safe to say that it is in the thousands like Pablo's other hitmen, especially considering that he was the leader of a criminal group with the sole purpose of carrying out hits for different cartels. Raul Meza Torres was the youngest hitman ever who had been recruited into the Sinaloa cartel. However, his reign would not last for long. He was the son of Raul Meza Ontiveros, a senior leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Torres looked up to his father, and by the age of 15, he decided he wanted to be involved in organized crime. His father was a deadly assassin, and Torres aspired to be the same. Occasionally posing in photos for Raul Meza, Torres could be seen with advanced rifles and other deadly weapons. This made him an idol for other young Mexican boys who looked up to him. Torres was a very driven and disciplined individual, always working towards becoming a more ruthless assassin. Unfortunately for Torres, his father was killed in 2007 by armed men in Culiacan, Sinaloa. The details regarding his death are unknown. Angered by this, Torres would get in trouble with the police numerous times. However, on 25th of April 2010, he was stopped by police officers in Zapopan, Jalisco. During the routine check, the hitman made a fatal mistake of taunting the officers with his weapon. This escalated the situation, resulting in Torres firing his pistol at one of the policemen, killing him instantly. The officers immediately shot back and dealt a lethal blow to Raul Meza Torres. Another hitman, who started out in his early teens, was Rosalio Reta. Also known as Bart, he would go on to become a notorious cartel hitman with a chilling reputation for his involvement in violent activities. Born in Mexico, Reta was recruited as a teenager by the Gulf Cartel and subsequently trained by the previously mentioned Los Zetas. From an early age, Reta was trained to become a ruthless killer, carrying out assassinations and acts of violence on behalf of the cartel. According to an interview with him, he killed his first person when he was only 13 years old.
How did it happen?
I was going on 13 years old the first time I took a life.
He described his first kill very simply, almost like it wasn't a big deal at all.
He pulled out a handgun, told me to kill that person, the one kneeling in front of him. And I just shot him.
His victims included rival cartel members, law enforcement officers, and individuals who posed a threat to the organization's interests. According to Reta, the practice he received was on life targets, not paper targets, which shows the sheer ruthlessness of the ways of the cartels.
You practice with live targets. I mean, I know it sounds harsh saying it this way, but it's just the way it is.
Reta's killing spree extended beyond Mexican borders, as he was responsible for several murders in the United States. Working as a hitman, he carried out targeted hits on behalf of the Gulf Cartel and their affiliated criminal networks. His involvement in high-profile killings and his willingness to carry out acts of extreme violence quickly earned him a fearsome reputation within the criminal underworld. Reta's loyalty to the Gulf Cartel and his deadly skills made him a valuable asset for the organization. However, Reta's criminal activities eventually caught up with him. In 2006, he was arrested by U.S. law enforcement agencies and later extradited to the United States, where he faced multiple charges, including murder and racketeering.